Welcome back to the book club. Today I'm going to be talking about The Outcast Mage by Annabel Campbell. This is Annabel Campbell's debut novel. I found this because she did a little AMA on Reddit, on the fantasy subreddit. I came across that thread. I sort of read through it. The book looked like something that would be up my alley, and I was looking for maybe a shorter book to throw in between when I start tackling the next Wheel of Time. And this came at the perfect time, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to try something new, try a brand new author, brand new book, something that nobody really knows anything about. Give it a shot, give it a read, and I'm very glad that I did. So, a little bit about why I like this book and sort of what it's about. Um, this was a very fun read in a very tight package. It has a lot of sort of typical fantasy tropes that you see around, and I think she did them pretty well. And the pacing was very excellent throughout. So, just a highlight of some of the things you could expect in this book. There's very briefly some wizard school stuff. If you love wizard schools, there's not a lot of that here, but there is some in the beginning. Maybe just enough to satisfy your craving for some wizard school funness. There is a sort of chosen one, but things are not quite going right yet, which is to be expected. So I don't know if this is going to be a trilogy, but there's at least going to be more books in this series. So the story doesn't conclude with this book. And so as a result, the sort of chosen one character, things quite aren't quite going right and don't quite get resolved necessarily by the end. And I would expect maybe, by the end of the trilogy or however many books there's going to be, we would see a conclusion to that. There's a magical mentor mentee situation going around where it's like, a not quite perfect expert mage along with this not quite perfect chosen one, and they meet up and have some fun experiences together. And then last but not least, there's dragons, which I think everybody loves dragons, or I love dragons, and I hope everybody loves dragons. And whenever dragons make an appearance in the book, I'm always like, yeah, let's go. The dragons are here. And so there's some exciting moments around that as well. Also, sort of layered throughout this, the kind of undercurrent of the plot throughout this book, at least, is this mounting pressure between the mages and the non-mages within this glass city. And so there's a lot of like political intrigue and whose side are you on between the various mages and non-magical characters that we follow throughout. And I mentioned this before, but I have to say the pacing throughout the entire book is very good. The book is about just over 400 pages, which for fantasy is very short. I'd consider that a short book, and it's a lot of meat within a very small package. This is definitely like the plot of what could be a Wheel of Time book, but within 400 pages. Because a lot of the sort of fat is definitely trimmed down, in my opinion. Maybe kind of similar to the pacing of one of the Cradle books by Will White, if you're familiar, where things just kind of keep moving. There's not really any doldrums or areas where things aren't really happening. There's kind of constantly like, ooh, another twist, ooh, another turn, ooh, a little bit more information about something that I wanted to know about. And it really keeps things rolling. Hello, Kat. And one more thing I want to touch on too is this is a debut author, so people are not going to be very familiar with what her writing style is like, and I think her prose is very easy and approachable. I'd say it's not quite like Brandon Sanderson levels of quite simple, but it's also nothing that I think anybody who reads fantasy books would struggle with at all. I think most people would find this extremely approachable. I think the scenes are very descriptive and like sort of you can very much imagine what the characters look like and what their surroundings look like. And so I want to read a little sample. This comes from chapter 7. It's not spoilers at all, just a little paragraph, so you can get a taste of what the author's voice sounds like throughout this. The workshop was surprisingly dark after the dazzling sunlight of the dome, despite the glittering artifacts strung above Lorene's head. Delicately crafted bulbs and twists of glass swayed as she closed the door behind her, sending shadows dancing along the walls. For a moment, Lorene struggled to make out the artifact. The magic which clung to Helios eddied around him like mist, obscuring the dark point in the palm of his hand. She had to focus her mind, push past the crowding magic, and look only to that one point. Malik and Lorene saw it almost at the exact same moment, recoiling at the wrongness of it. It looked less like an object and more like an absence, as if there was a gap where the artifact should be. Feeling suddenly dizzy, Lorene blinked and shook her head to bring herself back to normal sight. So, as you can see from those couple excerpts that I pulled, I think it's pretty clear that the writing is very approachable, maybe a bit more descriptive than your Brandon Sandersons, for example, but it's not quite that out of line. It's not anything that's super complicated, that's hard to parse, or super poetic prose that's maybe a little bit more difficult to read. It's quite straightforward and I think pretty enjoyable, especially with this like style of book and sort of the story that it's telling. And I think the audience that would enjoy this type of book is also going to enjoy this type of writing and the sort of level of description that is thrown in throughout. So overall, I really enjoyed reading this book. I started reading it on February 1st and I finished it today is February 5th at 7:20 a.m. So I wrapped it up just this morning, read it across 5 days. The book came out on I think the 28th of January. So I started reading it pretty quickly after it came out and I enjoyed it a lot. So I would definitely recommend this, especially if you're into books with dragons and wizards and magic that doesn't quite work right and maybe is a little bit funky. It's not quite a hard magic system like you would expect in like a Brandon Sanderson style novel, but it's also not quite completely soft magic. It's kind of somewhere in between. Not quite Harry Potter, but a little bit more obscure than that with some weird things going on. So I think it's really interesting. I'm looking forward to the next book in the series. I think that the sort of twists at the very end are compelling and don't quite leave you on a complete cliffhanger. They do close up some of the loops, but there's a lot of cliff beneath you still, which what I expect is probably going to be a trilogy. Um, I'm looking forward to learning more about the world and how the magic works and sort of why things are going the way that they are when the book concludes. So let me know in the comments below if you're interested in checking this book out or if you've also read this book. I definitely recommend it, and I'll see you next time.